All that and more coming up, but we begin with a U.S. fighter jet firing at an Iranian oil tanker as it enforces the Strait of Hormuz blockade. Madeline Rivera joins us live with all the details. Maddie.
Good morning, Todd and Carly. CENTCOM says it saw the tanker heading to an Iranian port in the Gulf of Oman Wednesday. They say American forces issued multiple warnings and informed the Iranian-flagged vessel it was in violation of the U.S. blockade. After the crew failed to comply with repeated warnings, U.S. forces disabled the tanker's rudder. So the ship has been stopped. The U.S. military says the incident shows the U.S. blockade on Iranian ships remains in full effect, even as U.S. and Iranian officials continue to work to strike a deal. The president tells our Brett Baer he is cautiously optimistic. Some of the key questions, though, include how to get the highly enriched uranium out of Iran and making sure the Strait of Hormuz is completely open.
We're in good shape. And now we're doing well. Now we have to get what we have to get. If we don't do that, we'll have to go a big step further. But with that being said, they want to make a deal. We've had very good talks over the last 24 hours, and it's very possible that we'll make a deal.
Axios first reported on the one-page memo the White House sent to Iran to end the war. The memo lays out a 30-day period of negotiations, and during that time, officials would work on a more detailed agreement to open the strait, limit Iran's nuclear program, and lift U.S. sanctions. Iran is reportedly still reviewing the provisions and has not sent a response yet to Pakistani negotiators. The president tells Brett he's hoping they can wrap things up in a week, and if they don't come to an agreement, the president says the bombing could resume at a higher and more intense level than before. Carly and Todd.
Madeline Rivera live for us in D.C. Maddie, thank you.
A deal appears to be on the horizon to potentially end the war between the U.S. and Iran. The Wall Street Journal reports the two sides are hammering out a 14-point memorandum laying a framework for a month-long period of talks, which could resume next week in Islamabad. Former NSC Chief of Staff under President Trump, Alex Gray, joins me now. Alex, good morning to you. So one of the latest messages from the president on this comes from Truth Social. He writes, assuming Iran agrees to give what has been agreed to, which is perhaps a big assumption, the already legendary epic fury will be at an end, and the highly effective blockade will allow the Hormuz Strait to be open to all, including Iran. If they don't agree, the bombing starts. So the two sides, Iran and the U.S., are taking another stab at diplomacy, but there's, of course, a lot of daylight between the two right now. What are the chances that something tangible actually crosses the finish line?
Well, Carly, I think we're actually moving in a positive direction for the simple reason that the blockade has been enormously effective. It's actually forced Iran to reorient its supply chains fundamentally. So everything that they brought in through container ships that's normally part of their economy, they've had to find alternative routes over land, by rail, through the Caspian Sea. You can't do that one for one. And so the enormous effect of that on the Iranian economy over the last several weeks is hard to overstate. And so I think the president now, despite the fact that it's incredibly difficult to deal with a regime that's in chaos and free-for-all, I think the president has finally used this blockade to be able to compel the Iranian leadership to come to the table and to actually consider a good faith effort to end this, because they really don't have much choice.
Yeah, and the latest from the Institute for the Study of War says that Iran is now not just seeking survival, they actually want some positive outcomes out of this, including sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz and long-term economic relief so that they could build their ballistic missile program. Is there any world where, especially that first one, will happen?
I have a hard time imagining that President Trump, who spent the last decade decrying some of the pieces of the JCPOA deal that Barack Obama did, would ever allow something like that to include giving Iran leverage over the Strait of Hormuz, which, you know, we've talked about for decades, something they'd like to have that's at the top of their wish list. I just can't imagine a world in which the president would ever allow Iran to increase its leverage coming out of this huge American military success.
Yeah, what about the timeline that could potentially, it is being reported that it could include a 12 to 15 year end to Iran's nuclear program, but then they could enrich to like a 3.65% after that time period. The president has already sort of swatted that down. Do you expect that to be in a final deal?
Look, I think that there's probably going to be some element of the highly enriched uranium leaving the country. I think there'll probably be some sort of moratorium, but an enrichment that even gets to something at that ostensibly low level, again, I think that would be very much different from the position that the administration and the president has taken for a long time. And that would surprise me, because I think it would be a concession to Iran that, given where we are in terms of the leverage we have over them right now, it would just be inconsistent with who's in control and who's on top right now. I don't see why we would need to give them that concession.
Yeah. And President Trump is going to be in China next week, and of course, you know, this is going to be a major point of discussion because China gets the majority of its oil from Iran, so something certainly to watch there at the end of the week. Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Carly.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.